My name is Ravit, and I've been working on this research project with this wonderful team. AI ethics washing, you might have heard this term. Basically, it's what you get when companies' declarations about how they support AI ethics are way, way more than their operations, what they actually do about AI ethics. The gap between them is called decoupling in organizational psychology. So decoupling is the gap between declarations and operations. What we wanted to do in this work is help decrease AI ethics washing. So you see a lot of work criticizing it. We are actually doing the first empirical study into how understanding this phenomenon and how can we help decrease it. Our method, this was a qualitative research study. We've interviewed 32 tech employees. We've analyzed those gaps between declarations and operations, and we've used organizational psychology as our foundation. As a result, we came up with various profiles, and we made empirically based best practices tailored for each of those profiles. One quick word about decoupling. When we talk about AI ethics washing, we have in mind positive declarations about it, but not matching operations. But it's actually one of four, right, possible combinations. So we can see the opposite, and we have seen the opposite of when the company doesn't have a lot of declarations about it, but it does have a lot of operations. There can also be cases of neither or both. We've studied this whole space, the four types of phenomenon, but today I'm only going to be talking about this one. When we analyzed the interviews, we did it in two steps. So this is how we did it. This is our method. First, we analyzed each interview separately. We found those ways that the company expresses its support, the declarations, the talk, and also the walk, so the kind of operations for AI ethics, and also sense making, how the employees that we've interviewed make sense of the company's approach. So this was step one, analyzing each interview separately. And then we've sorted them into groups based on the patterns that we've seen in those four things. I'm not going to be able to go into what companies say and do, the trends that we found in depth. So I'm just going to go over them very quickly today. One way that companies talk about AI ethics is indeed policies, principles, frameworks. You know, we talk a lot about them in the industry, and indeed we have seen them very often in the interviews. So that's one way that companies talk about AI ethics. How do companies implement AI ethics? So what are the common types of operations? One very common type, I'm calling it approval review. So that's the process that many companies do to approve a use case or a model before it's designed or before it's deployed. Of the ways to make sense of the company's activity or lack thereof, we saw many common ways to make sense of it. I was kind of surprised by this one. So sometimes when a company is not very active in AI ethics, it turns out that the employees do mention reliance on foundation models as one of the explanations. So they'll say that because of that reliance, either they cannot mitigate risks, or maybe it's not their responsibility because it's someone else's responsibility, or maybe they shouldn't because the foundational model maker is going to do it anyway later. So to me, this was very interesting. The main thing I wanted to present today is those types of AI ethics decoupling. We took those declarations, operations, and sense making, and we identified patterns and sorted them into groups of all types of decoupling. So we have at least one profile for each. And today I'm just going to present this one, what we call AI ethics washing, when companies are supportive of AI ethics in their declarations, but not so much in their operations. The rest you can also read in the paper itself. So very quickly, I'm going to go over those four profiles of negative decoupling, or as we call it, AI ethics in our industry. External focus. These are cases where companies have some kind of externally facing efforts like principals or even personnel, but those don't really have a lot of influence on the company's operations. Why? Basically, the explanation we got is that it's not really that important to the company, or there is some kind of a barrier. So either they think AI ethics risks are irrelevant to the company, or maybe mitigation isn't feasible because of the reliance on foundation models, or maybe they don't think it's their responsibility because it's someone else's responsibility, or they think it's slowing innovation. Second profile, we're calling it inconsistent operations. We've seen this profile exclusively in large companies that have some kind of a company-wide procedure, such as those AI ethics reviews that I've mentioned before. The problem here is that that process is not implemented consistently throughout the company. So maybe different teams do it and others don't. Or maybe it's inconsistent through time. Sometimes they do it and then sometimes they don't. So you have this inconsistency. The sense making that we got for this is that the process is very burdensome, or sometimes it's even divisive between different teams within the company. Third profile is standstill. In this case, we've seen companies that have really elaborate AI ethics frameworks and principles, and sometimes they've even presented them externally, but they're not implementing them. Why? The explanation we got is that the organization is so concerned about the risks that they're just not really adopting AI at all, right? They're just kind of halting. Fourth kind of profile that we saw, it became apparent to us when we interviewed people who were senior leaders in their company, in general, or specifically in the AI ethics units. And what we've seen with these people is that they are able to explain, in a very detailed way, the policies that the company has and why they are like they are and why they're important, but they're not able to provide a lot of information about how the implementation is going. So it suggests a bit of a gap between the two, especially when we probe them again and again about the implementation. They're not really able to provide a lot of detail. A bit about recommendations. In the full paper, you can see recommendations for all the profiles, but right now I'm just going to briefly go over recommendations for those 4 profiles that I've mentioned for negative decoupling, which we also call AI ethics washing. Starting with the first one that I've mentioned, the external focus, right? So that's when the company has some kind of externally facing signals, but not really a lot of implementation. Since the problem or the sense making seems to be about not really thinking AI ethics is important or relevant or something like that, then the solution we recommend is educational activities or culture shifting activities in the company, really targeting those things in their mindset and potentially presenting them with alternatives, such as things that we're seeing in those other profiles. For the inconsistent operations, stencil, and policy focus, I would recommend monitoring implementation levels and also rethinking the policy design itself. To conclude, I'll just make a quick note that these recommendations actually are different from very popular ones like always create principles, do approval processes. It's not necessarily the case we should do them, and they may backfire. So with that, I will end, and if you want more, you're welcome to download this deck and our paper and other information we have there. Bye.